Okay, what's going on, everybody? My name is Mang, and it is time again for another rambling, multi-hour-long primer on a different RPG system that I'm currently interested in. I decided last time I did this was on Godbound, and I did it in a different format with a PDF that I was just scrolling through on screen. But normally I just like to do these in person and show off the book. I don't know what format people prefer, but since I have the book, we're going to do it on camera. So, the game we are talking about today is Dungeon Crawl Classics. There you have it. There you have it. Glory and gold won by sorcery and sword. So, Dungeon Crawl Classics would generally be described... First of all, look at the size of this book. Look at it. This is like 500 pages. It's insane. But it's not that complicated, as we'll get to. We will find out what is exactly in all those pages. Anyways, DCC, as I'm sure I'll refer to it most of the time, would generally be described as an OSR game, which stands for Old School Renaissance. And so this is a subgenre of role-playing games that I largely ignored. Because my initial thoughts on OSR was this is a type of game for people that played Dungeons and Dragons 1st and 2nd edition, 30, 20 years ago, whatever, and were just, that was like their youth, and they're trying to recapture their youth by playing these really old fogey style games. And they just love the word THACO, and XP should be earned by the treasure you get, and all sorts of old concepts. And to be honest, I really don't know what OSR really embodies, I guess. Now that I've learned a bit more about some of the games that are classified as OSR, I don't know what really connects all of them and binds them all together other than their relationship to Dungeons and Dragons. And so there are some games like, I don't know, Lamentations of the Flame Princess that are basically sort of like Pathfinder, I guess. They want to take Dungeons and Dragons as sort of a foundation and just tweak it in different ways. And then there are games like Dungeon Crawl Classics, which really try to embody the spirit of Dungeons and Dragons while sort of going their own path. Now, I'm not an expert on anything, but I'm especially not an expert on old school Dungeons and Dragons, even new school Dungeons and Dragons, RPGs in general. I'm not an expert, and OSR especially, I'm not an expert. So, take everything I say with a bit of grain of salt, but I have read this book, so, there you go. But you're not here to really hear about OSR, you want to hear about Dungeon Crawl Classics specifically. So, as for its place in OSR, it doesn't really matter. All that matters is, is it a good game? And I think that it is. And I'm going to tell you why it is. So, Dungeon Crawl Classic, DCC, there's a thing from the earliest days of Dungeons & Dragons called Appendix N. This was in the back of, I don't know, the first book or something, the first D&D book, I don't know. Way back when. And Appendix N was Gary Gygax's inspirational reading list. it was the books that he had read that he said inspired Dungeons and Dragons. And so you, of course, have, like, Tolkien. I mean, Tolkien is on the list, of course. But you also have H.P. Lovecraft on the list. I believe August Derleth was on the list. So, Gygax didn't judge too much. You had Michael Moorcock on there. Edgar Rice Burroughs. Jack Vance. There's a list. There's a whole, the Robert E. Howard, Lynn Carter, all sorts of authors and books, fantasy, a bit of science fiction, a bit of horror. And so it's sort of, Appendix N has sort of become this list of tomes, this list of books that sort of embody everything that makes D&D D&D, it's like the holy grail of reading lists, I guess, as far as Dungeons and Dragons is concerned, because it was the direct inspiration. And so I guess DCC sort of self-describes itself as an Appendix N game. That is a game designed to embody all of these different tropes and aspects and the feeling that the same books from Appendix N embodied. Which is sort of a broad stroke, Tolkien reads very differently from Lovecraft. So that's sort of a hard thing to really pin down, and I don't know if anyone's really pinned it down properly. But the main thing that to take away from here is DCC is not a D&D ripoff, but DCC is designed to evoke these feelings that you have when you first sat down to play Dungeons and Dragons. And you have this world of possibilities in front of you, and it's not always a kind world. There's bad things in the world, certainly. But it's also an incredibly strange world, a very mysterious world. You don't know what's out there. When you first sit down for D&D, like, the breadth of possibilities in front of you is limitless, And so that's sort of what DCC tries to go for. It's definitely not a super heroic RPG. You're not going to have godly powers. And death can come pretty quickly for anybody. And I think primarily it's meant to be just a very strange and odd RPG, I guess, where nothing is ever fully understood as far as the game world that you're going to be playing in. And you'll see that as we go through this in regards to the magic and the bestiary and things like that. The world is meant to be mysterious, because if the players know everything about what's going on around them, you've already sort of ruined it. But all right, that's enough. It's enough philosophizing. So, let's talk rules first, because the rules are not that complicated for just the basic stuff. And if you're just starting out, you just want to sit down at the table and go, it takes like 5 minutes. Provided you have, some level 0 characters already whipped up. But since it's all random, you can do all that ahead of time. So, the core mechanic of DCC is a D20 roll, modified by Generally just attribute modifiers. And, there are 6 attributes, so that's pretty common. They range from 3 to 18. This should all be pretty familiar. And so the modifiers generally range from -3 to +3, I believe. Unless I'm mistaken, but that's probably right. So yeah, so if you're trying to do something involving strength, you roll the d20 and you add your strength modifier, depending on how strong the character is. That's pretty basic stuff. You already all are probably familiar with this. And you are trying to meet or beat a difficulty class number, generally pre-assigned by the dungeon master, which is called the judge in this game, like Judge Dredd. So difficulty class could be anywhere as easy as 5 for a pretty easy task to 20 or higher for something really difficult. So if you equal or surpass the DC, you succeed, otherwise you fail. A roll of 1 is an automatic miss. Critical failure, if you will, generally involving something bad. In combat, it's going to be a fumble, something catastrophic. And a roll of 20 is an automatic hit and is a critical hit. So there's generally something very good involved with that. More interesting and somewhat unique to DCC is the concept of the dice chain. DCC does not just involve d20s for its rolls. Rather than calculating all these different modifiers to a roll, like, oh, this gives me +1, this gives me +3, but this is -4 because of this factor, and oh, this is another +1, and oh, let me think about this. Rather than doing all the number game, which you can do, you can certainly, and some things do just give -2 or +2 or whatever, but you can make it more simple by just increasing or decreasing on the dice chain. So instead of a d20 for your roll, if you are hindered by something, you might roll a d16 instead, limiting the maximum number you can achieve with 4 below a d20, or you can go to a d14 or a d12. Or if you are under favorable conditions, you might bump up to a d24 or a d30. So you do have to involve some funky dice, some Xochi dice or whatever. So you can purchase those. They range in price depending on where you can get them for fairly cheap here and there. But they also provide a way for you to just simulate any of those dice using your normal dice. But, okay, so how is this game different from what I have played before? DCC RPG does not have prestige classes, attacks of opportunity, feats, or skill points. So yes, it strips out a lot of the sort of min-maxy, complicated, convoluted nonsense, which some people do enjoy. There's plenty of people that do enjoy min-maxing their characters and, oh, but this feat gives me this, with this feat combined with this feat, and oh, this feat combined with this prestige class, and oh my gosh, I could have a +30 to my bluff skill. No, none of that is in DCC. DCC is about taking the hand that you've been dealt and doing the best you can with it. It is not a game meant for min-maxers, and it's would be pretty tricky to min-max. There's really not much there to change. It's not a system built on this huge wealth of customization options. It's not like Shadow the Demon Lord, where you can have this just countless different character builds with you know, this class mixed with this class mixed with this, and or Pathfinder, or, you know, something like this, where it's just the mind boggles at how many different options you have available to you for building a character. No, this is just, you've got your stats, you've got your class. For a warrior, you know, most warriors are going to be like most other warriors. It's more about what you do in game rather than all the stuff around outside the game. Classes and races are one and the same. You are a wizard or an elf. Yeah, so this is an old school concept that was dropped fairly quickly, I think. Relatively. So yeah, if your character is a dwarf, your class is dwarf. There's no way around it. You can't decide, I'm going to be a dwarven wizard. You are a dwarf, and a dwarf in this game is primarily like a fighter. He's primarily a warrior. And so it can be a bit of a bummer if you want to play a dwarf that casts magic. But there's two arguments to that. One, you can just house rule it. Like, the game is very customizable in that aspect. You can change whatever you want. You know, if the judge agrees, if the table agrees, who cares? Make your dwarf a wizard. Like, whatever, you know. You'd lose out on some of the unique aspects of being a dwarf, such as smelling gold, I guess. I don't know if you'd give that to a dwarven wizard. But whatever your table wants, you can do it. It's not a huge deal. Secondly, you know, characters are pretty expendable, I guess. You know, if you get stuck with a dwarf after a funnel, it's really not that big of a deal to just switch characters. Like, what I'm saying, I guess, is in this RPG, you really shouldn't be attached to any one character. Death comes pretty easily, but if you do actually, you know, take a character for a few levels and he survives for quite a while, like, that's some serious shit. That's not a big consolation to somebody that wants to just specifically play a dwarven wizard, but yeah, I mean, anything is customizable here, if the table agrees. Okay, DCC uses an ascending armor class system. Normal unarmored peasant is AC 10, while a warrior and plate mail is AC 18. That concept is pretty familiar to most modern Dungeons & Dragons players. They haven't done descending AC for quite a while, but Godbound, for example, does do descending AC. That is an OSR game, so it's, you know, this game isn't like, oh, we love old school D&D, we gotta adhere to all these old concepts. Like, this is old school D&D with modern design sensibilities, and that it benefits a lot from that, I think. Not that descending AC is like a huge deal. Like, Godbound is perfectly fine, even though it uses it. It's just, yeah. Blah, 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 blah. What else? Well, the rest of it we'll sort of get into as we go. So, DCC. A DCC game generally starts, or it should start. You don't have to, of course, but you should start your DCC game using a funnel. So, a funnel is a adventure. It doesn't have to be a single session. It doesn't have to be a one shot. It could take a couple sessions or so, but it is an adventure. There has to be some sort of plot contained within an adventure, I guess, in which a number of level 0 characters, less than level 1, lower than level 1, peasants for the most part, peasants, bakers, apprentices, you know, non-adventurers, a bunch of them decide to become adventurers, or they are thrust into the situation. They're all kidnapped and taken into slavery, and they have to break out. Whatever the case, they are put into a line of adventure, even though they are not adventurers, and they must be forged. They must be pressed. They must be funneled into hardened characters. So, funnel is not perhaps the most accurate description, I guess. It's more like a strainer, really. Anybody that's not worthy gets left in the dust, and the few that are capable, they make it through to the other side, and they are stronger because of it. So, generally, each player is going to have 2 to 5, we'll say, to make it broad. More than one. Absolutely more than one. 3 to 4 is probably the right number of level 0 characters. These are pretty much completely determined randomly, and the judge runs them through an adventure. Generally designed to be a little bit lethal. Not stupidly so, because you want some to survive. Some need to succeed one way or another. It has to be something that a bunch of peasants could succeed at. So putting them up against a den of dragons or something, and, you know, expecting them to kill them all, is probably not going to happen. So generally, you know, there's traps, and there's goblins or wolves, you know, maybe a few orcs or beastmen, you know, whatever. There's plenty of funnel adventures pre-written out there for you to look up and see how it's done. But generally, yeah, it's sort of a slow grinder designed to kill a bunch of these little peasants, and a few trickle out the other end. Ideally, one per person at least, but often I think some people will come out the other end with a few or a couple level 0 characters. And it's up to you to decide what to do from that point. The players can just pick one that they want to play as going forth, and they become level 1, and that's their character. Alternatively, if people want, you can continue to control multiple characters until one dies, or until you have only one. It depends on the situation and what people are interested in. But yeah, and then you continue on. You start, or you continue a normal campaign, and all your characters are level 1. And so it's designed to sort of it's a very organic way of deciding on a character, because you've taken these little peasants, you know, these little tiny bags of HP that are barely capable of anything. They have no special abilities. They don't know anything about magic or heroic feats or anything like that. And you take them through this adventure. You throw them into danger. You know, you see what if they can surprise you, and you create this sort of connection with this random character, and you end up with characters you really would have never thought to play as, and it's just a much more interesting tale of the level 0 baker that becomes, you know, some grand wizard or something. You know, it's a very interesting way to do it. So it's recommended to do the funnel. So when you're making your level 0 characters, you're going to roll 3d6 down the line So this is as old school and as random as it gets. So you look at strength, agility, stamina, personality, intelligence, and luck. And you just 3d6 for strength, 3d6 for agility, down the line. Now, they even say in the book that ability score generation is the most house-ruled thing ever. Because, you know, a lot of modern RPG players, they're coddled. I don't want to sound like spoony too much, but yeah, they're just too comfortable with their 46 drop the lowest, or an array. And I was like that when I played 4th edition D&D. I was the same way. I was a min-maxer a little bit during 4th edition. I liked my array. I liked everything, you know, as positive as possible, as good as possible. And I would, you know, I looked up guides to make sure my characters were as capable as they could be. But I have changed my tune, my friends. RPGs are just far more interesting when you embrace randomness, when you embrace chaos. Not everything is orderly, and that's good. Embrace mediocrity. So 3d6 down the line makes you appreciate those 18s so much more. They're character defining. And you might end up with a character that has 8s in everything, or a 6 for personality or something, but that's fine. Like I said, it's not about what abilities your character has and how capable they are. It's what you do with what you've been given. DCC really seems to be an RPG that is about player skill rather than character ability. To really do well in DCC, to survive and to progress, you as a player have to be smart, which a lot of RPGs, that is not necessary. And that doesn't appeal to everyone. You know, some people come to RPGs just to throw around dice and have some wacky adventures. And they like being overpowered and things like that. But for me, I'm talking about for me, I like being challenged. You know, I like being restricted and having this shitty character doing the absolute best he can with what he's got. You know, I played 5th edition once as a commoner. He had 10 in every stat. He had no abilities. I played that shit. And it's good. It's good, man. Makes you think. Anyway, so strength, you already know what strength does. Agility is basically dexterity. It's ranged weapons, initiative, reflex saving throws, and your armor class modifier. So agility is pretty important. Stamina, of course, is your HP, and fortitude saving throws. So level 0 characters, peasants that have high stamina. Yeah, it's pretty nice. You know, a lot of things will kill you in one hit no matter what, but 7 HP is a big difference from 1 HP at level 0. Personality is all sorts of... It's basically charisma and wisdom combined. So it's willpower saving throws, it's persuasive stuff, it's your charm. It's also cleric's spellcasting attribute. So it's important for clerics. Intelligence, obviously, all the intelligence stuff. And it's for wizard spellcast, so it's important for wizards. You also get +1 language for your intelligence modifier determines how many languages you know. So you can know extra languages. And if you have an intelligence of 5 or less, you cannot read or write. And then there's luck, which is a bit of a different case. So luck in this game influences a shit ton of stuff. Just all over the place. Primarily, it affects your rolls when you do a critical hit. You can get a better effect. It's modified by your luck. Fumbles are modified by your luck, so you can sort of lessen the blow of a fumble, of a critical miss. Corruption is modified by luck, which we'll get into in the spell category. You can also burn luck. So anytime you make almost any roll, you can permanently burn your luck attribute in order to increase the roll. So this happens after you roll, but before you are told the result of your roll. But generally, a player is aware of how good or bad they rolled, you know, in a range. But if they think, okay, I need another 6 points for this roll, otherwise it's a failure, and I can't fail, they can permanently burn 6 points of luck to give them a +6 on their roll, which is a big deal. But boom, that's 6 points of luck gone. It's possible to restore it, but it's like a big adventure just to get some of your luck back, because luck comes from the gods, and so good luck comes from the favor of a god, and bad luck comes from the scorn of a god. And so it's possible for, if you really piss off a god, he can just drain your luck. But if you go on some big pilgrimage, or you find some ancient artifact, whatever, you do something great for a god, they may restore some of your luck. They may shine some good luck on you. So burning luck is always an option if you have luck. So that's pretty good. And there are also some checks that are just luck based. You know, if something is not influenced by any sort of attribute, physically, mentally, whatever, it's just sheer luck, you might have to make a luck roll, in which case you're trying to equal or under your luck. Yeah. Finally, when a character is created at level 0, they roll a d30 on the luck table, the lucky roll table. And this is an extra thing determined by your luck modifier, and it modifies some sort of roll for each character. So if you roll 1 on this, all of that character's attack rolls, as long as they're alive, all of their attack rolls are modified additionally by their luck modifier. So if I have a high luck of, say, 16, and I'm, hitting somebody with an axe, I would roll a d20, I'd add my strength mod, I'd add my attack bonus, which is, at level 0, it's +0. And I would add +2, because that's my luck modifier of having a 16 luck, if I got this lucky roll thing when I created the character. So that's really good, right? All attack rolls modified additionally by your luck mod. Aha! Except if you have a negative luck modifier. Yeah. If you have a real shit luck at character creation, because remember, it's 3d6. You can end up with a 3 luck at character creation. All your attack rolls could be -2 or -3 or something. In which case, that's a shit character, man. But that's the way it is. So there's a whole bunch of different things here. It can affect unarmed attack rolls specifically, damage rolls, any skill check. It can, your spell damage. Now, if you get spell damage, but you end up being a warrior, that's absolutely worthless. Which, if you have a shit luck, oh well. But if you have if you get that and you have a 18 luck and it's like, oh man, I got +3 luck, but I'm a dwarf, then you're probably a little upset. But you don't get to pick, how you're born. Initiative, armor class. You could have a +3 to your armor class. That's pretty freaking awesome. Hit points applied at each level. So every level you get a plus or minus depending on your luck mod. Again, like, this is just the start of the book. We're on page 19, but start of the book, this showcases just the randomness of the entire game and how you need to just accept it and embrace it. Roll with it, if you will. Yeah, so then you have your 3 saving throws: fortitude, reflex, and willpower. So each one is modified by an attribute. Otherwise, it's just a d20 roll. So, level 0, it's probably going to be -1, 0, +1. It's pretty small. But as you gain levels, it gets an innate increase. Languages, of course, there's common. Everybody knows that. And then there's different languages for all sorts of stuff. Elves, dwarves, halflings, centaurs, giants, gnomes, goblins, kobolds. There's a whole appendix of languages. Some RPGs or some DMs, whatever, just throw out language entirely. Is just not a very interesting concept. Everybody just speaks common, and that gets you through the day and whatever. But I actually like languages in games. I think that's more interesting. It's more realistic. And yeah, it's shit when you don't know the language and you're trying to figure out a puzzle, or you're cursed by something because you didn't know the language. But I like to play characters that know every language, so that's it. So at level 0, each character gets 1d4 hit points modified by stamina. So yes, it's very easily possible for you to have some characters with 1 HP. They're very fragile. Pretty much anything will kill them instantly. At level 0, there's no death saving throw. Actually, there is no death saving throws whatsoever. There's a roll over corpse thing we'll look at later, but at level 0, if you take damage and you drop to 0, you're done. You're a smear on the wall. Like, that's just it. That's the point. You get 5d12 copper pieces. If you start out in a town or a civilized area, a village, yes, spend that shit. Buy ropes and climbing gear and crowbar. Buy anything possible useful for adventuring, because it will get used in your funnel. You get 1 randomly determined piece of equipment, and you get 1 randomly determined occupation. So here we have the D100 list for occupations. And for each character, you just roll a D100 and you get whatever it is. So most of these are going to be humans. So if it doesn't specify a different race, then you are human. But some of them say dwarven blacksmith, or dwarven miner, or dwarven rat catcher. You are a dwarf. Elven falconer, or elven glass blower. I think all elves are glass blowers, but anyways. You are an elf, halfling, so on and so forth. If it doesn't specify, then you are a human. You're a human barber. You're a human beekeeper. You're a human dock worker. You're a human rope maker. And so that character is that occupation. So if you were to do a task related to said occupation, well, we'll get to skills in a bit, but you would be trained in that task. Your character knows their job. They know how to do it efficiently, unless you decide that they're shit at it if you want. Then they each get a weapon, generally related somewhat to their occupation, and they are trained in it, so they don't get any penalties or anything like that. Most of these are daggers. There's a lot of daggers. There's a lot of clubs. It's a rare situation where they have something different than that. Sometimes it'll just be like it'll be like a pick or a crowbar or a razor, but it's meant to be just a dagger or a club or something. There are some staffs. There's a few axes, like the butcher has a cleaver as an axe. The caravan guard has a short sword. That's pretty good. The elven barrister has a quill, which functions as a dart. Farmers get a pitchfork, which functions as a spear, which is not bad. That's a D8 damage. And farmers are the most likely occupation that you're going to get, which makes sense. There's slings, short swords, short bow. In the funnel that I ran, everybody would have benefited from ranged weapons. They were hard to come by. Pretty much everybody had melee stuff, and they didn't come across any ranged weapons. So that's like, other than the quill as a dart that they can throw. Your daggers, I guess you could throw if you wanted, but a short bow, that would be very good. And then you get a trade good related to your occupation. So an armorer has an iron helmet. A beekeeper has a jar of honey. A cobbler has a shoehorn. An elven glass blower has some glass beads. And it's like, you know, some people are like, what the fuck am I going to do with glass beads? If you can't think of any single use of a glass bead or a group of glass beads, then you've got some thinking to do. You've got some work to do, some reading to do, something. Every single trade good listed here could have some use in an adventure. You just gotta be creative. I mean, yeah, some of the stuff is obviously far more useful, like hide armor or 100 feet of rope or a shield, but other stuff like dice, well, you know, if you... or a sack of night soil, crutches, chicken meat. Stuff has uses, people. Think of it. And then you also get a random trade good just determined from another table. Somewhere around here. Oh, that's further along. Here it is. Yeah, it's just a D24 roll. All of this is adventure gear. So this is all somewhat useful. This is your candles, chains, crowbars, grappling hooks, iron spikes, lanterns, torches. So they give each character one piece of useful gear. So you don't have to fret too much. Okay, we're 44 minutes in and we're on page 24. Alignment. Okay, so alignment, of course, is one of the most contested, argued, discussed, whatever thing in RPG history. DCC has 3 different alignments. Very simply, lawful, neutral, and chaotic. So, for each of your characters, you must decide if they are lawful, neutral, or chaotic. Theoretically, it is possible to change at some point if your character just continually acts out of their alignment. I think at some point a judge would just be like, okay, we got some changing to do. But for the most part, that is your life path. So this is not good, neutral, evil. Okay? That is That is a completely divorced discussion. Lawful characters believe in law. They believe in order. They believe in authority and loyalty. You know, the Empire in Star Wars is a lawful organization. You know, they are the law. and you know, there are people that obviously would not think of them as good, but the entire organization, every single person in there, believes in order. You know, things there's a chain of command. Things are done in an organized fashion. Loyalty is very important, and you know, above and beyond, above everything is order. So lawful can be good, can be bad. That depends on perspective. It can be neutral, in sort of a, you know, in a different sense, but primarily it's about organization and order and law and authority. Chaotic and chaos, on the other hand, is of course the opposite. They believe in disorder and individuality and entropy and you know, the destruction of order. Again, chaotic can be good, can be bad. Jack Sparrow, I guess, is generally a pretty chaotic character. But you wouldn't really describe him as evil. And this is why, you know, most D&D things like that, they tend to sort of separate things even further, so you can be lawful good, lawful neutral, lawful evil, so on and so forth. But you really don't need that distinction in order to understand the difference between lawful and chaotic. So yeah, you know, it's certainly plausible for many adventurers to be chaotic because they care about themselves first and foremost. They care about their individuality. They don't roll with any organizations or any guilds or anything like that. They are out there seeking their own fortunes and paving their own way. Neutral, of course, is the in-between. They don't take any sort of specific stance towards or against law or chaos. So, you know, D&D has, like, true neutral, which is somewhat unattainable. The ultimate balance of all things. Neutral in DCC is neutrality between law and chaos can reflect a measured morality, balancing costs and benefits without strong principles one way or the other. It can also reflect ambivalence or indifference. Fundamentally, neutral characters make choices based not on loyalty, values, or self-advantage, but by evaluating each and every opportunity that comes along. Which, yeah, also could describe plenty of adventurers. Probably most characters are gonna be neutral, unless your character is specifically against organizations of any kind, or is specifically against acting as an individual, or you know, they have to follow orders, you know, things like that. Neutral is a pretty broad scope of just seeing what situation comes up and thinking about it rationally rather than with any sort of pre-described emotional pull or anything like that, and just deciding what to do. So Alignment probably matters most for clerics, of course, but it pops up here and there. So, XP. XP, you know, all sorts of RPGs do things differently. A lot of games, or at least a lot of DMs, a lot of GMs, whatever, take the approach of just everybody levels up when they decide. You know, after this session, okay, you all level up. You're all level 2. You're all level 5. You're all level 9. Because they've decided that these characters have done this much stuff. They've experienced this much. Boom, you're the next level. You don't have to worry about, oh, how much XP is this worth? You know, everybody. You don't have to worry about this guy's gotten more XP than this person because he did this, but this guy didn't do this, and so on and so forth. So I've definitely played in games like that. It's perfectly fine. It works just fine. But some people prefer to really sort of calculate each encounter with XP as a sort of a barometer of how difficult it is. You know, challenge ratings and things like that, and everything sort of measured out. DCC goes with a pretty damn simple system. Not perhaps as simple of just you're level 4. But each encounter is worth anywhere from 0 to 4 XP, with the standard being 2. And an encounter, the definition of an encounter, is left intentionally vague in the book. Encounters do not just have to refer to monsters or enemies of some type, because you could achieve a goal bypassing any sort of encounter, by doing various things, picking locks, climbing, swimming, you know, who knows what, negotiating, so on and so forth. You know, if I just accomplish a goal through persuasion and through negotiation, with characters that could have become enemies, but I avoided that completely, that should not nullify XP in any way. And that's certainly a concept that's being embraced more and more. And so here specifically it says, XP are not earned merely by killing monsters, disarming traps, looting treasure, or completing a quest. Rather, successfully surviving encounters earns the character's XP. So, surviving an encounter. And it's up to the judge to decide what an encounter is, when it starts, when it ends, you know, traps, locks, negotiations, enemies, whatever. They decide what an encounter is, and they decide for each one of those encounters, is it worth 0 to 4 XP. And anyone that participated in the encounter gets that XP. And every character has the same XP table, the same advancement table. There are RPGs where different classes advance at different numbers. So a thief gets to level 2 at a different point than a warrior. This is sort of an old school concept, I think. But some OSR games do that, and I think DCC actually originally did that, and they decided it was stupid. So, yeah. So, to get to level 1, technically requires 10 XP, but if any character survives a funnel, they are level 1. You don't have to do that, but you should do that. Level 2, then, is 50 XP. So, you have to earn 40 XP after you hit level 1. Now, at standard 2 XP per encounter, that's 20 encounters, right? Whereas with everything you did is 4 XP, because it's really difficult, you could do it in 10 encounters. But if you only do little shit, it could be a lot more than 20. So, leveling is not quick in DCC. You have to go through a lot. You have to survive a lot of encounters. You can't just sit around. And so, that's level 2. Level 3 is 110 XP. Level 5 is 290 XP. So, that's a lot of encounters you have to survive. If you make it to level 5 with a 1 character, bravo. Unless your judge is really lackadaisical, really nice, that's going to be tough. It's going to be tough. All right. I think we will leave it off here for today, for the primer part 1. We didn't even get to classes today. I feel a little bit disappointed. So yeah, next time we will look at classes. Warrior, wizard, cleric, so on and so forth. And then we've got some more rules to look at, crit tables, stuff like that. There's not too much. And then probably in the third part we'll get to all the spell stuff. There's a lot to talk about with spells, and I'm very much looking forward to it. So yeah, that's the way it goes. Okay, so my name is Mang. This has been part 1 of a primer on Dungeon Crawl Classics, and I will see you fine folks in the next part.